Hello. Right, so who here was at the first circular steel? Yeah, so you might remember that I've done this before, which we felt there was a certain irony in this. So effectively, I've been cut off at the ankles. We've followed Severfield's process. So I've been, checked for defects, blast cleaned, recertified to EN 1090 and bolted onto the end of today. So it's me again, but we thought it was kind of fitting. I've also changed jobs since then. So I now work for Useful Simple Trust, which a lot of you probably haven't heard of, but you might have heard of Expedition, which is our engineering arm. I basically sit in the sort of overarching trust, and I lead all of our materials work within that. And Steve asked me to sort of reflect on, I guess, not just today, but where we've come so far, and talk a little bit about where I think we could go next with this journey that we've all been on. So if I think back 3 years, and you think back to, slightly shabbier room than this. I don't think the aircon was quite as good there. I'm really glad today that it's good at this one. Most of the conversations were about the sort of the art of the possible, and they were about potential, right? We'd got guidance that was soon to come out, whereas now we've got guidance that's been turned into standards. We've got projects that were at a pretty small scale, where we're talking, tons, a few tons, maybe a dozen tons. Now, unless you're reusing hundreds, it doesn't seem anybody's interested. I think we've come a huge way in that time. We've got guidance, we've got case studies, we've even got government interest to the level that they could do us a video and not quite make it down today, but I think that's pretty good from the government in my experience. And we've got, we're discussing economics, and we've got graphs with pound signs on them and all that kind of stuff. This is pretty serious for 3 years worth of movement in an industry which typically measures progress in decades, if not more. So I think we should be pretty proud of that. And it sort of feels like reuse of steel has now sort of come of age, right? It's graduated university and it's gone and got its first job. Job's not over yet. It's a long way to go till retirement, but it's managed to get over some pretty big hurdles in that time. But I think the other thing that's changed in the last 3 years, if we're being honest, is the sort of context we work in is completely different to how it was back in 2022. I think it was 22, right? Yeah, good maths. Net zero is now a sort of political football. There's a lot of sort of polarization out there in politics, not just in the UK, but around the world. I think we've seen the end of a sort of two-party government system in the UK. We've probably seen the end of, a sort of US-led world global order. And yet we are talking about a material that is globally traded as a commodity. And that gives us all sorts of unknowns. And that's totally different to where we were a few years ago. And we've seen firms try to make a business out of this and really struggle, right? Some have come and gone. Some are trying again. And this is not linear progress. And to me, the message there has been that, just having a good idea is not by itself enough to make something move. I think the other thing that's happened within this time frame is we've maybe got more clarity over steel's role in global emissions. We now understand that recycling more scrap within the UK doesn't necessarily change things at a global scale, and that's a difficult truth that we have to tackle, that we have to try and work our way around. We understand that even if we solved steel reuse tomorrow, that would only displace steel from the recycling market, not from the primary steelmaking market. And of course, primary steelmaking is where 90% of the emissions happen in steelmaking. So we're chipping away and we're making good progress, but there's still some really difficult truths in amongst all that. So at this point, you might be asking, okay, Will, what's the point? Get on with it. There's a beer waiting, and you're starting to depress me. And I was thinking today, well, what are we going to do next? Because given that we've got to this point where we've got pound symbols and we've got big projects and we've proven things at certain scales, where can you go other than just getting things bigger and more mainstream? And then what it struck me was that actually all of these hurdles that we've been talking about overcoming for 3 years, and in many cases have overcome them multiple times, those are the same hurdles that other parts of this industry are still really struggling with. Concrete, bricks, facades, and all the sort of small stuff. They can't even work out how to reuse light bulbs a lot of the time. And so actually I'm starting to think that maybe the biggest win of all here is not just to sort of take this stuff and double down on it next year, but is to take this knowledge that we've gained and try and share it with the wider industry and try and help other aspects of construction to replicate the successes that we've seen in the last 3 years. Effectively, those other materials, those other parts of the sectors, if we've graduated university, they're probably still in primary school, right? We've still got a long way to go to retirement, but there are also things we can do to help bring the rest of the market with us. I think Owen made a really good observation earlier about how this won't thrive until we are working within a circular economy. And at the moment, we're trying to make circular steel work within a linear economy. Well, the only way we're going to see a circular economy is if we help create it. And that means creating the conditions for other aspects to thrive as well. We've also seen how the more of us are dealing with insurance, the more of us that are dealing with standards, the easier that's been to overcome. And insurers will get more used to dealing with reused steel if they're also dealing with reused everything else. And so there'll be a sum of more of the parts if we can help chip in. So I think my final thing I'd say then, which is a bit of a plug, really, is to ask you all to get involved with the wider industry movement around circularity. And for a date in your diaries, on November the 4th, there's going to be a cross-industry reuse summit that's being led by ASBP, but has also been supported by Engineers Reuse Collective, Architects Declare, Structural Engineers Declare, ACAN, ICEP, FIS, Circular Do Tank, and the newly formed Circular Buildings Accelerator, which is going to try and act as a bit of glue between all these different initiatives. So if you can put November the 4th in your diaries, it's going to be in London. I think it's going to be at the British Library, of all places, weirdly. But it should be a really good day. And it would be really great to see you guys there bringing along all these experiences and helping share them with the wider industry to help them do what we've done. And hopefully I'll see you all there. And in the meantime, I'll see you upstairs for cold beer and hot sun. Thank you.
Okay, that's it, everyone. Off to the terrace. Thank you very much. And Tata and Emerald Steel are waiting for us upstairs.